Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you happen to find yourself. My name is Carmen Yetzi Mazzara. I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. I'm delighted to welcome you to day 2 of our Public and International Service Advisor Week of Workshops. For those of you who were not able to join us yesterday, PISA itself is a network of advisors across the US who help and support each other to make it easier to bring these issues and to champion these issues on your campus. This is our 5th PISA training, and we're so glad to have all of you, again, from all across the country here with us. I particularly want to thank the Robertson Foundation for Government, who makes these trainings possible. And I look forward to seeing you throughout the whole week as we touch on lots of different issues. And then I hope you'll engage with us even going forward. We have different kinds of programming and webinars and emails to keep the PISA network going all throughout the year. One session in particular I want to highlight for you is the one that we're doing on Friday that will talk a little bit more about APSIA, a little bit more about PISA, and talk about some of the ways that we can be of service to you. Hopefully you all have seen a copy of the program that includes bios on our wonderful speakers, such as Christine Omolino, who we'll hear from in a minute. If not, I will ask my colleague to put the link in the chat so that if you haven't had a chance to access it yet, you'll have the full schedule for the week, as well as, again, the profiles on all of our speakers. The session is being recorded, so we'll have that available to you afterwards as well. And with that, I'm very pleased to be joined by my colleague, Chris Omolino. Chris has had a long career in higher education and in international education, particularly as the Director of Admissions and Financial Aid for the Public Administration and International Affairs program at Syracuse University's Maxwell School. She wishes I'll invite Chris to tell you a little bit more about herself, but otherwise we'll be able to jump right in and be able to unpack some of all of these different terms that you might have heard and all of these different degree programs that you and your students may have come across. So with that, Chris, please, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Carmen. Great to see you. And it's nice to see such a large number of people who are interested in learning more about these topics and how best to prepare your undergraduate students. As Carmen said, I'm Christine Omolino. I'm up here in Syracuse where, yes, it snowed on my tulips last week, but it's 76 today, but it'll be 48 tomorrow afternoon. So we are at that time of the year that everybody enjoys in central New York where we have shorts and turtlenecks in the same load of laundry. It's just a fun time, but I have, again, like Carmen said, I've been working in admissions for public administration, policy programs, international affairs, and I also served on our PhD committee for 15 years as well. So I'm going to talk about all of that in this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And there we go. So this presentation is prepared just for you today. And again, it's about graduate study across the fields of public administration, policy, and international affairs, although we'll touch on other fields as well, as there's a lot of gray area for students who are looking to get engaged in these professional career paths. We're going to talk a little bit about defining goals, how students should think about this process, how you can help them to think about this process. We'll cover different kinds of graduate programs, how to evaluate them, how to evaluate the curriculum, the pedagogy, and then talk a little bit about what you need to know and how you can better direct your students to resources, give you some resources, some research factors for students to consider as they move forward. It's a lot of information, and I put a lot in here so that we can share the slides so that you have it all. Depending on what your questions are and what's important to you today, we might get through all of it, and we might focus more specifically on certain areas than others. So I always start at the beginning. For undergraduate education, students are looking for a lot of different values in an undergraduate program. But when they're looking at graduate school, I really always encourage them to be much more strategic in their thinking. It's not so much the type of university or where it's located, who their cohort will be. Those things are definitely important. But, you know, at the cost of higher ed these days, when you're looking at a graduate career, a graduate school education, you're really looking about your career expectations and what are your professional goals for earning this degree. It's important to have that understanding so they know which kind of degree will unlock the potential to move into that field or into that career path. So really that first step is getting that career expectations clarified. Do they really need a very specific certification to move into that field? Do they have to pass exams? Will they need a specialized degree? It's important for them to plan not only for the short term, but for the long term. And will this degree meet not only their short term needs, but their long term career goals? And are there different options for this pathway? You know, graduate school is a really great investment. There's a lot of return on investment for different degrees that students earn. But I think that there's a lot of different ways to get to where you might want to go professionally, and grad school is just one of them. Don't let the dean of my school know that I said that out loud. But the students, when you get to the graduate level, and you all probably know this, you have master's programs and PhD programs, but you have a lot of variation in master's and PhD programs. We're in the field of international affairs, public policy, public administration, public management. We have a much more professional orientation. It's not that you don't learn knowledge. It's not that there's not depth of knowledge in these fields. There's theory in these fields, but it's also about taking that knowledge and that theory and applying it to real world skills-based tests and skills that they can learn to go out and work in a more professional setting. So they might do research, they might engage in analysis, but it's often with a much more professional orientation to go out and have an impact in a policy arena, whether it be domestic or international. And that's a very different orientation than a traditional research, academic, content-driven program, where you get really in-depth skills and knowledge, maybe in Latin American studies, and you can learn all about Latin America, Latin American studies, really great skill set, a really great knowledge area, but then how do you apply that and where do you take that knowledge? And the more academic programs, which tend towards going into a PhD so that they can go out and be academics and practitioners, academics and teachers and researchers in universities and teach the next generation. That research and content driven programs really lend themselves to those kinds of careers. But the more professional orientation programs have, again, more group work involved in them. You're not writing a master's thesis, you're not writing a dissertation, but you are maybe doing a group project or a consulting project. So it's just a little bit different. And students have to understand where they want to go. Are they, more individual, and do they want to be singular in their research and they want to work maybe with a small cadre of other researchers, or are they people who want to go out and be in that in organizations, in government, in NGOs, working and out there in the field? So the career goal alignment with the degree preparation is really critical, not only in just choosing a master's or a PhD program, but then how that master's or PhD program is delivered. So helping them to think through these questions is really important. When they're looking specifically in the field of public policy analysis, public management, international affairs, and then all the different specialty degrees that are now out there, there's a lot of overlap in public affairs, public administration, public management, international affairs. I like to think of it as, these three major areas. Public management is all about designing and delivering public programs and public services. Now, that's not, all public programs. Public programs are international or domestic in their orientation, but they are, how do we, build streets, and how do we get vaccines out to people during a health crisis? How do we design programs to collect taxes and then redistribute that through budget systems? So that public management piece is about the design and delivery of programs and services. Policy analysis is about, well, are we delivering the right programs to meet policy goals? If we want, healthy citizenry or educated youth, what are we doing with these public programs, with this public money? How do we best design programs and analyze the data that's out there so that we're meeting the needs of today? So policy analysis curriculum, again, whether it's a domestic policy or an international policy, has a much more analytic component to it, definitely a quantitative component in many schools. But it's really about determining the best policy solutions by looking at data, looking where we should better direct resources. Because if you can identify different variables, then you can identify programs to address those variables. And these are kind of big umbrella, policy analysis, public management. I think of international affairs as kind of a context within that big umbrella. So there's a lot of MPA and MPP programs, MPM programs, public management programs out there. They have analysis and management built into them. They may have international or just purely domestic, or just be local government in focus or nonprofit in focus. But international affairs is another dimension where you can take these skill sets and apply them to large governance structures in the international trade, instability, peace building, war and terrorism, poverty alleviation. So we have community and economic development looking at poverty in the United States. And we have poverty alleviation programs that work overseas. So again, we're dealing as a world with all of these different policy areas, but you can develop a program and engage in a program that gives you the context and the courses that relate to the policy or the career that you're really interested in, whether it's domestic or international. Human rights, disaster, humanitarian action, those are all really big areas in the international affairs. And this is by all means not an exhaustive list. Students will often wonder if they should get a degree in business management or a degree in law. And there's definitely really important uses for management skills in the business sector in an international arena, if you're looking at international trade, perhaps. Law, I always say law and humanitarian action, law and humanitarian affairs, really, there's a lot of overlap there in international law. So if you again, are looking for a management curriculum, an MBA is definitely going to give you that. But they won't give you an understanding of government operations, public institutions, or the policy analysis that you'll see in a public policy or public management program. There we go. There's a growth of, sorry, I was moving my box and I muted myself there. There's a growth of specialty degrees that are coming out. So you'll see literally a Master of Science in Security Studies or International Development or Food Insecurity. And you can definitely go with a really deep program like that, a very, this is the breadth versus depth issue. Students always say, should I go get an MAIR with a focus in security or should I get a Master's in Security Studies? There's no right answer for everybody. It's just an understanding of where they want their career to go. Is this the skill set and the knowledge that's going to move them forward in that career? And are they really, committed to that career in the long haul? I think that the depth issue really does make sense if you know that that's where you're going to focus your career over the life of your career. Whereas if you, find out when you're out working in international development, you start looking at some stuff on international health and public health, your degree may be too narrow in the long haul for something like that. You might need to go back and get some more courses and training. So that generalist versus specialist conversation happens all the time. And that's just a decision that students are going to have to make. But I think it's important to kind of, put it to them in that decision-making matrix, that there are degrees that are much more generalist in their approach and they may grow with you a little more over the course of your career. I think it's critically important that I don't know what I did there. That a student earns a degree that's really going to, like I said, survive them over the lifetime of their career. Regional study and language, this is where that specialty degrees, there's a lot of degrees out there like that, Masters in Latin American Studies, really helpful, but it might not have some of the skill development that the students need to then go out and actually be a qualified, employed student at the end of their MS. So we want to make sure that the programs that they pick, whether they have language opportunities, work abroad opportunities, that they have that kind of skill-based curriculum built into them, even if it is a very specified degree. And that's where this pedagogy is important. So are there, these are questions they can ask about, a program that they're, is there a capstone course? Are you doing a traditional thesis dissertation, master's thesis dissertation, a more academic preparation for a more academic degree? Is very different than doing a team projects working for the World Bank on a project that you are then consulting and giving them information to move a project forward. Are there professional internships? Is it a very interactive classroom? Are they learning applied skill development through the coursework that they are learning? Or are they, again, engaging in very long-term individual writing, which again is a really valuable skill, but it's just valuable for a certain career path. And we're talking about professional careers in the fields of international affairs. So but many of the APSIA program schools and in NASPA in the PA field have this more professional orientation. So as an advisor, what are some of the things that you can think about to see if a student's ready for grad school? And you work with them closely, and I'm sure that you know all this, but they want to qualify for better job prospects. The career they seek, and they have a really good understanding of that, requires this degree to actually enter into that career field. So that's a really good reason to go to grad school. They want or need that additional research or fieldwork opportunity, and the grad program does provide this, but it also provides them that foundation for moving forward professionally. Again, it's all going back to having the career goals identified so that they know that the degree and the skill set that comes with that degree is what they are going to need for their career. Our undergraduate advisor for our IR program, I always love this quote. She says that they are prepared to get into a great program or to get a scholarship from a decent program. So really, that they're prepared academically and they've had the different internships and the experiences to get into a really high quality program with a really great network that's going to set them up career-wise, or they're really strong enough to get a scholarship from maybe a mid-tier program so that they're not going to too much debt. But I think that's a really practical way to look at grad school. And that they're not just hiding out from a bad economy, although we do see that, right? And we are seeing that. They're not just taking the path of least resistance. I don't know what to do. I've been a student for the last how many years? I think I'll just stay being a student. That's easier than figuring out how to go out and get a job. And if they're still trying to figure out what to do and they really don't know what they want to do, it's probably not the right time for them to go to grad school. Carmen asked a little bit about what we're looking for, and this is kind of on our website. These are the big three things, right? We're looking for a commitment for public service, an understanding of the professional nature of the fields of public policy, public management, administration, and international affairs. We're looking that they understand that there's skill sets involved and that there's work out there that they can go do. If they don't have that, they're really not ready for our programs, right? The academic ability is incredibly important. And then that's the second thing we look for, the ability to handle demanding graduate level coursework. And then what the student will bring to our student community, their passion, their motivation for working in these fields. Those are the primary three things that we're looking for. I put this other slide in here because it's kind of the talking points. It's not just enough to be a really good student. We see the 3 9s and the 4 O's all the time. That's not enough. They need to understand what they want to get out of this degree program, what they want their professional career to look like, and that this is a really good fit for them and that this degree unlocks those career paths. That's first and foremost, like I said. Many programs are looking academically for some quantitative foundations, some courses in math, economics, and statistics. You really can't go out and do very good development work without having a grounding in economics. And it's math-based economics, it's not theoretical economics. So having some quantitative ability in these fields is becoming more and more important every year. Not all programs in IR will have that quantitative dimension, but I would argue the really good ones do. For IR degrees, international exposure and secondary language proficiency may even be required if not desired. So students should really highlight this, any international experience, exposure, and language skills on their resumes. It amazes me to this day that students apply to an IR degree and they speak 4 languages and yet it's still not on their resume. Additional academic exposure to the social sciences is very helpful. You don't have to have a social sciences or an IR undergraduate major to go into the fields of public administration, policy, or international affairs. It's not required. We get students from all majors and minors, but that exposure to the social sciences can definitely be helpful because these are fields that come from the social sciences. And while prior research is really informative about the students' abilities to do analytical thinking and quality writing, it's not critical. So some students get hung up, I haven't really done research, and that's not an issue. It's definitely helpful, it is informative, but it's not a mainstay of our admissions requirements. Overall, we're really just looking for hardworking, engaged students who can take initiative, make things happen, who come from diverse backgrounds, who really want to engage with others who want to make the world around them a better place, who are curious about the world around them, the problems facing the world, and who are looking for dynamic solutions to make that world a better place. So that's really what we're looking for. Some of the things that the students can do to help improve their profile for not only admission but financial aid is engage in different kinds of programs or exposures. And this is where, again, I'm going to share these slides with Carmen and Brianna so that you'll have them. But there's a whole lot of different programs out there that the Gilman, and you're probably familiar with a lot of these, the CSLA, Critical Language Scholars Program, CLSA, McNair programs for research, Public Policy, International Affairs, and Public Service Weekends, really promoting the fields of IR and PA to particularly underrepresented groups. Wrangell and Pickering programs, which prepare you for careers in the U.S. Foreign Service, programs like Payne, Fulbright, Boren, etc. So those are larger programs, very visible programs. A lot of those programs come to school, if students participate in those programs and they apply to schools like us, top schools in PA and IR, they get funding that's attached to them, matching funding. And that's a really important thing to consider. But just getting international exposure, whether it's through study abroad, whether it's through volunteering or teaching abroad, programs like the Peace Corps and US Fulbright programs. And then CIE, really wonderful, has a great website for checking out ways to go and work and be exposed abroad. Federal government internships are definitely helpful. There's a number of congressional internship programs that operate, obviously in DC, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute and others. There's White House internship programs. There's the virtual student federal service program. So there you can do a virtual federal service internship from anywhere in the world. And that was pre-COVID, these programs existed. Department of State has a Pathways program, and then the American Ambassadors Fellowship Program are just a few there. Service and community volunteerism show students with that initiative and that passion and that level of engagement that we're looking for. AmeriCorps Vista, Coro is an urban policy program. Urban fellows, there's teaching fellows like TFA, Teach for America, City Year, just working on a campaign, whether it's a, local or a national campaign, working with your local refugee resettlement centers, a great way to get international exposure. Not everybody can go abroad. Not everybody has the resources to even take a semester off to go abroad. So getting involved locally with immigrant and refugee populations is a great way to get that exposure. Volunteering, with the ESL programs in your area. And then definitely campus involvement and leadership is something that really stands out in our applicants. Model UN, debate teams, any kind of student group that they participate in, especially if they're able to hold a position of leadership in those student groups towards their junior and senior year. Those are all things that stand out. Serving in student government, again, being a tutor or participating in a service learning program. There's some wonderful resources. You see that I've got APSIA right there. You all know about APSIA because that's our sponsor today. But on the public policy, public affairs side is the network of schools of public affairs, policy affairs and administration, NASPA.org. They have a searchable engine as well as APSIA of schools that belong to both the NASPA network and the APSIA network. Obviously, program websites. And I think it's important when you look at a school's website for prospective students to not only look at the curriculum and the curricular offerings and the degrees and the courses and the faculty, but look at the alumni profiles, because again, if that degree isn't preparing their alumni for careers that the student aspires to, then it might not be the best fit. Even if it's the right degree, that school or that university might not be the one that's going to propel them. So look to see where the alumni are working. Information interviews, obviously talking with their college academic advisors, their colleagues, maybe they're out working, program internship supervisors, respective professionals in the field. And I imagine all of you have alumni from your institutions that help advise or work with students from different fields. If they can talk to alumni from the undergraduate institutions, that's really helpful for undergraduate students. Visiting and attending school-sponsored events in their area, or even if they have to travel a little, is always really nice. In the days when we can do that again, we're looking forward to those soon, hopefully. And then obviously for very specific questions, there's people like me at the other end who can answer those questions very directly, so you can reach out to any admissions office at these schools and ask those questions. I will say I get a lot of emails from students who say, can you tell me about your program? And I mean, I've been there for 25 years. I can say a lot of things about my program. So we do like for them to be a little bit more, do a little bit of research before they reach out to the directors of admission and ask us some very specific questions. These are some of the questions that they might want to ask, stuff that they might want to look for on the website. If they don't see it there, then definitely ask for this information. Again, where did the graduates go? Where are the alumni working? What different career fields? But then also regionally, nationally, internationally, where are they physically located? And then while they're there in the program, what does a student profile look like? What does your community look like? What's the diversity? Do you have a large residential population? Is it an in-person kind of residential program? Is it a commuter type school? Is it an online program? Do you have online options if that's something they're looking for? Faculty student ratios, elective classes, size of core classes, etc. These are all things. If it's really important for the student to be, part of a cohort, then they really want to make sure that that cohort is a place where they're going to feel comfortable and like they're learning a lot from their fellow classmates. Who their faculty are, and what their areas of specialization are. Look to see who's teaching the classes that you'll be taking. Are there a lot of practitioners that come in and teach? Are a lot of doctoral students teaching, or are you working with tenured faculty that might change the level of instruction or the depth of instruction that you can see? What are the student resources that are available? Do you have your own school level career services specifically for those master's students? If not, how do students get access to career services or academic advising? Is there financial aid for internship support? If I'm going to spend 2 semesters away from campus, is that all on my own dime? Or if that's required of the program, or is there assistance to help me to manage that part of the program? And again, what is that learning environment like? What are the opportunities to engage in that professional organizations, internships, study abroad, etc. And I say that the strategic part of looking at grad school is important because in most programs that are not academic, master's, PhD, become a professor of, there is a cost. There is not only a cost of time, but often a tuition cost. So full fundings tend not to be the norm. People kind of expect that in an MBA and a law degree, but then they think, oh, international affairs, that should be free. But it's the same professional field, it's the same professional orientation. So they are similar to degrees in, you know, social work, business, law, that are professionally oriented masters. They're not fully funded typically. So it's never too late to prepare for the funding of finances related to going to grad school. There are definitely, you know, federal loans. There are some universities that are lending institutions, not too many, but they do exist. Primarily university funding is the support that students will get outside of loans for most of their graduate studies. There's not a lot of third-party funding out there. But again, finding out about partnership programs, like we will, if you're a Pickering fellow, the Pickering give you money and we give you the rest of the monies. There are ways to make this happen if you think of in advance and you do research in advance. Students should develop a plan on how to gain that experience and make them not only competitive for admission, but competitive for financial aid, which is, again, largely merit-based in our programs later on. So the earlier they start thinking about this, the earlier they can start preparing. And they can manage their debt now. I used to love, there was a gentleman, he goes, you know, live like you're broke now, which most undergrad students are, but we work with a lot of people who are working. I say, start living like you're broke now so that you can manage a year or two of grad school. Okay, and why would you do all this? Because the return on investment's definitely there. And it's not really just the salary, it's about career satisfaction. It's when you've decided that you want to, you know, dedicate your career to making the world a better place, and you really want to go out and be an active part in that field and see your work have value to others. The recent DevX poll said that 89% of professionals in the IR field said their degree was worth the investment, not only of time, but financial resources, that it was very important to their career advancement. And 86% of IR graduates felt satisfied or very satisfied in their long-term career. And on the NASPA side, you can see here from a recent survey, and I say recent, I think this was about 2 years ago, that again, 87% said their degree prepared them to lead and manage in public governance. Almost 90% said they were prepared to participate and contribute to the process, not just be in the room, but contributing to the discussions in the process, and that they could articulate and apply public service perspective, and that 81% said that they make a difference in their work on a daily basis. So again, students who really have that career goal and want that career that has an impact in making the world a better place. And APSIA students and graduates and alumni are really ready to go out there in the global marketplace and make a difference, then the investment is well worth it. And here's just a little sampling of what all the students might do, the different kinds of work, the different sectors they might work in local, community government, state government, prefecture, regional government overseas, think tanks, research organizations, multilaterals, development agencies, et cetera. But they really are, the students who come to our programs and our fields are the ones who are the change makers and who have that higher purpose in their career. I wrote an article a number of years ago with a colleague who is still in the field, just not at Princeton any longer, Jose Ochoa. And it's an article that talks about what students should do to prepare to to prepare a competitive application for graduate school. So it really breaks down the application process and what they can do as applicants. So I think that's it. I'm going to go and stop sharing the screen. And however we want to do questions and answers, Carmen, Brianna?
Yes.
I don't know
So
if there's.
we do. We have a two-parter in the chat already, and I invite all of you, if you think of things, to throw them in the chat as well, or we can raise hands. The power of Zoom is it gives us lots of choices. So to start with one of the two parts of the question that we have, and I'll expand on it a little bit. In other fields and other disciplines, Christine, there are often silos. You have to go to a certain school if you want to have a certain job at a certain kind of organization, and those organizations only recruit there, and that's the end of it. Could you talk a little bit about our space? And in particular, the question is whether an online only MA might be the kind of job that would prepare students for the State Department. But if you could branch it out, not only for that piece, but for all of our space, and what the career pathway, the grad school to career pathways look like.
Yeah, so in our field, and I come from the most generalist of generalist degrees. So I've been at the Maxwell School for 25 years, okay? So I've been there, this is what I know, but I go around the country with all my colleagues, and most top schools in international affairs and public policy tend to see themselves as more generalists. They're not pathways for any one degree, any one organization, any one institution, or even any one sector. There's definitely variation. There's definitely schools out there. There's a great school in Kansas. If you want to be a city manager, they'll train you to be a city manager, and they do it really well. And everybody becomes a city manager there. But you can come to my school and become a city manager too. But then you can also come and go work at at the World Bank. So schools like ours tend to have a broader, that breadth versus depth approach, and pathways that are very wide and varied. And that's what makes it hard to evaluate us, right? Because if you can do anything, then how do I pick which school is best for me? So I would say that the old model of going to this school to go to work in this organization or institution is an older model. I think that there has been most recently kind of this growth of these very specialized, like I said, MS in security studies or cybersecurity. You know, I tend to look at those as really nice boutique degrees, but they're very narrow in their approach. And I think that students who you're all academic advisors talking with, early 20-year-olds. At 20, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know where I was going to go professionally, right? And maybe some of them do, but I think that when you're 40 and you're going back for a degree, then maybe that specialized credential's the right way to go, because you've already been where you need to go and you know where you need to go next. And some of the online degrees are really helpful for mid-career professionals to advance. But I think our schools really do take this generalist approach. We're going to give you skills, and then what policy area or what regional area or depth of knowledge that you can add to those to make your career path. It's kind of a package. And this is what we're going to give you. And then here's the different options for then making it more narrow and doing all of your internships in Latin America and becoming a Latin Americanist, even though you have a broad IR degree, because you might end up working in a different part of the world if you're working with the State Department. So I don't know if I answered it, Carmen.
No, I think that's absolutely right. There's so many ways in. It's not siloed, and if the online MA is the kind that's going to prepare you for the sorts of things the State Department is looking for, based on those evaluation criteria Chris talked about, I think it makes perfect sense.
I think you evaluate all the programs the same way. Like where are the graduates going? Do those graduates, when they came into the program, look like me too, right? So there's a lot of graduates or alumni of different programs that are doing X, but they came in with Y, and I'm not even close to Y yet, right? I don't have 6 years of doing X before I went into that program. So I think you got to look at not only the cohort of the students the program accepts, but then where they go professionally, and make sure that you're in balance with both of those.
Which speaks a little bit to the other part of the question, which is, should you go to a different grad school than you went to undergrad?
You know, in an more academic circles, my faculty will say that, right? You know, if they did their bachelor's in history and they want to do their master's and their PhD, they need to be exposed to other faculty and other theorists in the field, and they need to go to a different grad program. And I think that that's where that notion comes from. Most of the degrees in particularly public policy and public administration don't teach undergrads. So we've never seen that in that field as much. So I think it's a matter of being exposed to different faculty and different courses. And if you are at an undergrad institution where maybe the master's program is delivered with a different set of faculty than you've been exposed to, then it might make sense you can stay there. But if you're going to be seeing the same faculty that you just saw for the last 2 or 3 years of your major, then you might want to explore.
I think that goes back to the don't do it just to do it because it's strategic and makes sense. Yeah. We were wondering, have graduate admissions for the types of programs you described become more competitive since COVID, or is it looking pretty typical?
I've had more competitive. And this is so funny because I just told you all that you shouldn't go to grad school when the economy is really bad, to hide out from a bad economy, but yeah, everybody does it. And so we had our most competitive and largest applicant pool since the late 2008 recession, this year. Not last year, but this year. It is more competitive, but I won't say that it's on the admission side as much as it's on the financial aid side. Again, because our programs are not fully funding students as a rule, and we're not funding everybody as a rule. So it tends to be more competitive, but I would say, you know, take that with a grain of salt. It just means you might get admitted, but the financial aid package you get this year might not be what you might have gotten 2 years ago, or who knows what's going to happen in 2 more years. So the competitive piece of that becomes being able to be prepared for the costs. And the costs are not just tuition, the costs are costs of living and time out of the workforce.
Thank you. And most schools will share a composite number or composite price tag, I assume, right?
Yeah. You know, we're pretty, admissions people are pretty adept at giving you a ton of information on our websites. We want you to have all this information. That's why I always get kind of cringe a little when I get, tell me a little bit about your program, or I get 18 questions and 16 of them they could have answered if they just look 20 minutes on our website. So we are, you know, we're not shy about what we're looking for in a student. We're not shy about how much it costs, and we do try to tell people about financial aid and opportunities that they should seek out as undergrads, right? Because we have matching or post-undergraduate to work for a year or 2 and then come to grad school. Maybe they do Teach for America, and we have a matching program, a guaranteed funding if they come here. Peace Corps, U.S. Peace Corps fellows get a 50% tuition discount. That's huge. So, you know, we tell them all this on our websites.
Great. And for those who are able to join us on Thursday, we'll also have a session with even more of our admissions advisors, so you can pick their brains too, and you'll hear a lot of similar answers, and you'll hear some distinctions as well. One of the questions from someone who sent me directly, and again, I invite all of you to put your questions in the chat box, was whether if a student wants to work overseas, there were benefits to going to school in an international setting.
You know, I can't speak to that as well, to be honest. Again, to me, the matrix is looking at those those schools that are international, and there's some wonderful schools internationally, right? And seeing where students who might be US, who've gone there, what they've done with that degree once they've graduated, right? So I think that it's a wonderful, opportunity. I think there's some really great programs overseas, but I would want you to, put the same matrix to looking at those schools and those opportunities as you would put to any graduate program that you're looking at in the United States. So where are the networks? What are the career opportunities? And are the people who are getting those careers out of that program similar to me, right? So if, school X in Europe has, all these alum working in these really great institutions, but they're all European, then, you're from Nebraska. Is that option really going to be for you?
One of the questions that I get a lot is students come with the degrees that they know. So they may come to advisors and say, I feel like I have to go to dental school, I have to go to law school, I have to go to medical school, because they may not be as aware of these kinds of programs. Are there particular traits of a student that if an advisor sees that in a student, this may be a good place to steer them in addition to those programs they may know better?
Yeah, so, again, I think it all goes back to trying to break down what their goals are, what makes them happy about the work that they want to do, right? So, and I didn't introduce myself in the beginning. I'm a social worker by training. I was a therapist for 8 years. So for me, it's all about the student being their best student, their best self, their best career. So I'm always saying, okay, well, why do you want that degree? What do you hope to do with your career? Where do you want your career to have an impact? And there's lots of ways to help make the world a better place. And healthcare and the health, professions is a wonderful way to help serve others. Law school, also a wonderful way. But they're very narrow ways that you can do that. And our degrees tend to have, we always say the public sector, the public and international sector impacts every part of our lives, right down to, that my coffee came from, approved source in a different part of the world and got here, legally. And I enjoy my coffee, but I know it's safe to drink because there's public policies and programs and international trade agreements in place that keep that coffee coming to me and keep it safe, right? So, but students who have that global interest, that have that curiosity about why things are the way they are, who have that engagement of wanting to work on behalf of others and make the world, and I say make the world a better place. I don't shy away from that. Those are the students who might be fulfilled in a degree that has a public policy or international affairs, international policy. Students who are interested in different languages and cultures. And, for the student who wants to study overseas, almost all IR programs are going to get you overseas at some point during their curriculum anyway. So that's going to be part and parcel, but you're going to go overseas in a professional internship, in a working capacity that builds that international affairs profile out of a program that may be US based. I'm trying not to talk too much. It's hard for me.
No, but I think that very is the ethos of the kinds of students who may really find a happy home here, even if they didn't know it was where they should be. Yeah. For students who cannot go abroad, maybe because of family circumstances, how does it look to admissions officers if they have a Peace Corps prep certificate or other things?
Yeah, so definitely. So I mean, we don't expect that, and obviously the last year and a half has taught us, right, that international mobility can be limited for everybody, but that's we're a mid-sized community in central New York, and we have one of the largest refugee resettlement populations here. There's definitely ways to engage with international topics and international new refugees, new Americans on your college campus and your Center for International Studies, that you can kind of get that exposure without having the ability or maybe to go overseas. So anything like that's going to be helpful. language study, just taking courses in a secondary language or a third language, taking courses where you write a paper and you learn about a different region of the world, even if you can't get there. All of that becomes really helpful if you, we're looking for a pathway and again, an understanding of the field.
Thank you. And for those who were able to join us yesterday or who weren't, the recording is available. Our speakers on the career session also listed a number of local organizations that are doing global work. So I encourage you to check that out, and you'll find that link on the APSIA YouTube page, and you'll get it soon in your email too. Christine, could you share what are the trends regarding international versus American students in admissions, I assume? And are international students primarily enrolling in online grad programs?
So are you talking COVID world or just in real world, like pre-COVID or?
Melinda, you can feel free to unmute yourself if you want to let us know. Pre-COVID or now.
Yeah, okay. So pre-COVID, I mean, we're in central New York, so we're not, in, major cities. So international students make up a good portion of master's students in IR public policy programs generally, and 25–30%. Some schools might have more than that, depending on where they're located. We usually ran around 25% international. And when I say international is from like 22 different countries in 1 year, right? So really broadly international. So I would say that maybe some large universities might get upwards of 40% international. Carmen probably knows the data of the APSIA schools a little better than I do in that regard. I will say we went from 25 to 30% to 12% last year during COVID. And right now I'm working with students from actually 20, that's why the number 22 is in my head. I'm working with 20 students from 22 different countries right now, about 35 students, which is again about 30% of our students coming in next year. I don't expect that they're all going to make it. The consulates aren't open. I had my first student from India, the situation there is very dire right now, drop out today, not for any health reasons, just because it's just not a good time to travel. So we're seeing the restrictions on travel and the restrictions on being able to get the visa physically because consulates are closed, it really impacting the international population of our students. But we had 80% of our students in Syracuse last year. We were in person, believe it or not, and all 12% made it to the US. So it wasn't a large number, but they all got here. And we're hoping to do a little better this year.
What are your thoughts on post-college work experience before graduate study?
That's more typical for us, right? So that, if you ask us what our median average age is coming in of students, it's 26, 27. And I think it's just, we get a lot of really great students who apply straight from undergrad. We definitely do. But I think that their intellectual, the students who are interested in IR, they want to go overseas. They want to go do a board, they want to do language study. They go out and they do a Fulbright, and then they come to us. So we do really encourage that. They'll get better financial aid if they've had exposure and work in the field prior to coming in. They're just a little bit more directed. They have more to offer the student body. But we have really great students who come straight from undergrad who put me to shame as how directed and motivated they were at their age, right? And they've done all the right things, and they're really fabulous students, and they get jobs. They're not hampered in the job the post graduate school market at all. In fact, in some cases, because they're younger and they have less, they don't have family to care for, whatever, they don't have regional restrictions, they can go anywhere. They tend to do really well. So we do get really great directed students straight from undergrad, but post undergraduate work experience, if it's related, or fellowship programs, or programs like service programs like AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, Fulbright, whatever, they do tend to increase your financial aid, your merit-based financial aid.
So we have about 5 minutes left. Before folks step away, I do want to ask you to fill out one very quick poll. But before we ask you to do that, Christine, any other last thoughts that advisors should take with them to help them understand the differences and really know what sorts of students are well suited for this space?
I think it's the student who's that change maker on your campus, right? That student who's engaged, who's curious, who, you know, not only reliable and a good student, but that has that energy about, motivating and questioning why things are the way they are and how they can be different and how do we decide what's best. Those are the students that might be ready right from undergrad, right? And again, we have a lot of resources, all of us do on our websites, and a lot of them are very public facing. So students can look on our career website and look at, some of the career resources that our graduate students use. So there's a lot of resources out there for the students. So, tell them to reach out, and that's why we're here.
Thank you so much. For our participants, I'm going to ask you to do a very quick poll, if it will launch. Just letting us know how we did. I also encourage you to join us tomorrow. We have 2 sessions, one about talking to your students about what counts and helping them really tell their story in an effective way. And then later in the afternoon, Eastern, we'll have a group share, a chance for you all to hear from each other and share some best practices and build some community. On Thursday, we have some of our admissions advisors again talking about ways to access and pay for and prepare for grad school. And then on Friday, you'll hear from me and my colleague, Brianna Suarez, a little bit about APSIA, a little bit about PISA, and even more ways that we can hopefully make this very easy for you. So thank you all for completing this poll. Thank you, Christine, so much for sharing your wisdom with us. We'll have the recording for you. We'll have the slides for you. And we look forward to seeing you at upcoming PISA workshops and staying in touch throughout the year now that you're in the PISA family. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are.
Thank you, Carmen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.